welcome to another hobby cheating video. So the topic of
uh, glazes in the way of doing color blends came up recently on the PMP, and that's funny because it aligned with a video I wanted to make. So a big part of the hobby cheating videos are going to be all about saving you time. That is to say, one of my main goals here is to make sure that the tips and such that I give you are as often as possible not going to be things that add a great amount of time. In fact, I want to reduce the time it takes to have you paint a miniature while at the same time increasing the quality that you output, which sounds counterintuitive or impossible, but really we have a lot of bad habits often when we start painting that increase the amount of time it takes for us to paint a miniature, and they don't need to be there. So if we just correct some of those, we can in fact paint faster and better simultaneously. So that's what we're going to do today. Today, one of the things we're going to talk about is undershading. So as you can see here, this is a miniature that is Zenithal highlighted. Now, I did this with an airbrush, okay? And we're going to have another video eventually about why you should own an airbrush, but that's later. For now, we're going to talk about this. You could do basically the same thing with rattle cans. So if you have a can of black spray paint and gray and white, you're good to go. Okay, that's all the three colors I used here. I didn't do anything fancy as far as colors go. Certainly, you can get all three of these in a rattle can. And it's just as directionality. So the black was sprayed over the whole miniature. It was all black. The only thing tricky would be you couldn't do the shield effect without a more targeted thing like an airbrush. But you could do everything else with a rattle can. So the whole miniature was sprayed black. And then gray was applied from this angle right here. Okay, so from a 45-degree angle, or effectively, if you think of this as the rattle can or the airbrush, it's like this, right? So when I flip him upside down and point him at the camera, you can still see the black underneath there, right? In fact, if you look like that, you can see where the dark color is very much still the predominant color there because that's hiding under that fold. But when you look at it like that, it looks all bright. And so then white was applied like this, straight down over top. Okay? And that's really all there is to it. That's when I talk about zenithal highlighting, that's all there is. And what this video is all about is encouraging you to do undershading, to think about the colors underneath what you're painting. You can do this mid-process, during primer, whatever, okay? Think more about what color you're putting under what you're actually about to paint because it's very, very relevant, all right? What I see a lot of times is people just prime stuff black and then go to painting the miniature. Don't do that. I'm going to have a separate video about using primer in your paint scheme and how you can actually get away with it and make it not look like crap. But here's, if I could say one thing, if I could impress upon you one thing from this video, stop priming your miniatures only in black in all cases. I'm not saying there's never a time to use black primer. There is. But at the very minimum, go get yourself a couple extra cans and do a simple scheme like this on your miniatures. It's going to make your life so much easier. First off, it's a map for where you need to highlight. Okay, that's number one. Like, there's no question to me of what's raised on this fig, what I need to highlight, because the paint did it for me, right? So, if nothing else, it's going to make that faster, because I can see what's what. But what I'm actually going to talk about today is using this to actually then vastly quickly simplify your painting. So as I said, you'll notice here from this side of the cloak, you see mostly white. But if I flip it over, you see mostly gray on the underside here, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to take our handy-dandy little gross thing here that I've got that I mix my paint on. No, I'm not using a wet palette. Yes, you can use a wet palette. It's fine. It's not going to hurt anything. Use it or don't. We'll talk about those another time. I'm just going to put a little blue in there. I'm using the Game Color Magic Blue here. There's 100 blues like this. It's a very bluey blue, right? It's not really a sky blue. It's not really a royal. It's just very blue, very bright blue. That's the key. Now, if you watched my last video, you know I'm a big fan of these two, right? And here we're going to put them into effect. So
we're going to take some of the thinner medium, just a small amount here. I'm going to go ahead and put in a drop of that. I'm going to get a gross little side stringy here that I'm going to take off. There we go. Just going to put in 1 drop of that. Now I'm going to go to my glaze medium, because we're going to be making a glaze here, folks. And I'm going to go ahead and go 1, 2, 3. I'm going to actually put in quite a bit there. Now, do the exact dropper amounts matter? Nope, not at all. Get it to the right amount. Then I'm going to take my handy dandy dropper you saw me use last time. I'm going to put in 2 drops of water. Now, I happen to know that's about the right amount. All these little tools and things you saw in my last video. Take my little stick, mention that. I'm going to mix it up. Not doing this with a brush, not ruining a brush by scraping it. I want to get it nice and mixed. Nice and stirred here. Then I'm going to drag it up the side. And when I look at this, that looks still just a hair too thick to me. Now that to you, you can see that there, I assume. Let me drag it up this way. You can see how that's running. I'm going to bring that right up into the camera. So if you can see how that's running, that's pretty thin. But we're not quite down thin enough yet. Okay? So no problem. That's all right. It's easier to thin a little more than it is to make the paint go back. So I'm going to do 1 more drop of glaze medium in there. I'm going to put in 1 more drop of water to mix that up again. We want it nice and thin, real thin for this. So let's go back up here. Let's drag it up the side. A little better. What we're looking for, by the way, is how fast does it run back down the side? How does it drain? Does it stick? Does it run down? Etc. Okay? So, close. Do 1 more drop. There we go. That should be good. All right. So, now that we've got our paint really thinned out, like really thin, okay? One of the most common things I hear is people say, I want paint with a good coverage. Oh boy. I don't even know what that means. I certainly don't want that, because I want to use the color that's underneath in the scheme. I want to use this to help me, not to hinder me. I don't want to cover over, because then if I just base coat and it's 1 color, then I'm done. I have no guide. I then have to go all the way back up with layers or glazes or something like this. I want to absorb some of this color from underneath. So that's why I've primed like this. Okay. So I'm going to start with a wet brush here, just to further water the paint down a little. I'm going to dip in. Now, one of the keys is we're going to get almost all the paint off the brush. Okay? Notice how I'm dragging it against the side there to get that off. Then I'm going to go ahead and pull it toward the tip by running it across my finger. And you'll notice, you can see on my thumb how thin that is. Right? And that's exactly where I want it. So let's do that again. Scrape off most of the paint. We don't want a lot of paint in there. I'm going to drag it across the thumb. I'm going to go ahead and run that all down this miniature. Okay? We're going to take this all over the cloak. And we're just going to drag this blue along nice and even. We don't want it to build up or anything like that. We're not doing a wash or anything like that. We're just going to go ahead and very quickly paint this out. Always use the back of my thumb, just because it's a good way to make sure that the paint is dragged toward the tip of the brush. It also helps get rid of any extra excess. You never get pooling or paint is out of control, things like that. Okay. So, there we go. Now, I'm not going to stop there, but let's just take a look at what's happened. Okay? So, what's happened after this one time is I've tinted all of this blue. Okay? Now, you can still very much see the color gradation underneath there, right? And look what's happened. Here, in the brighter parts, I've got a much brighter blue. Where the gray and the black was, where this is undertone, I've got this dark. So let's take a second and talk about why this is, because this is very useful in general to do a lot of things. I'm going to have another video planned where we're going to talk about making really bright red and orange, and this is going to be useful knowledge for then. So why does this happen? Okay, well, it's fairly obvious if you think about it. But white, what do we know about white? Well, white reflects light, right? White reflects most of the light that hits it. Black absorbs light. So these two have no colors. They're not bouncing a particular part of the spectrum. White reflects the entire spectrum. Black reflects none of the spectrum effectively, right? Or very little. So when we take a thin paint like this, so thin that the color underneath can show through, the white will stay bright and will reflect its color up now through basically the lens of the color over top of it, whereas the black will not. That's what's going on here, okay? So, and I'm just letting this dry out. When we're doing sort of a thinner glaze like this, we're always going to let it dry out completely before we go on. And it's a nice chance for me to talk this through. So you can see here what I've done in this first coat is just a very light tint. But what I have is I have this full gradation of color, right? Like when I hold it like that dead even, you can see the brighter part down here. You can see the darker in the fold. And already we've got a pretty nice looking blue cloak. Now it's a little faint right now. This is a little too light. So we're gonna fix that up. And we're gonna fix that up by just applying a second coat of the glaze. Okay. So let's do that again. Let's just take that over top. Again, nothing special, nothing tricky about it. We're just going over it. Just painting everything. No magic to this technique. This is just painting. All right, so there we go. So now we have a much more blue cloak, okay? And when that dries, what you can see there, so let me try to hold it dead on so you can really see what's going on. Notice how when you look at this straight on, what's happened is we've gotten very dark recesses down here and very bright spots up here where the light would catch it. And we have all of our natural gradation, right? And that's it. Now I could keep glazing this down. I could do some additional layering and highlights. So if I was really inclined to make this, if I really wanted to take this up, my next steps would be to take this blue that I have, mix in a little white, keep it really thin, and just start glazing up these little edges here, these little ridges, right? Where I wanted to get some specificity to it. So maybe this ridge isn't quite bright enough, so I'd take a little bit up there. Or this ridge I want to really brighten. And I could do the same thing in reverse. I could take the blue, mix it in with a little dark gray, and get down in the recess here. And just do a couple thin glazes to further blow apart these highlights, right? Because one thing that comes out of this technique is that, the color is going to do something, and it's going to bring all these extremes together. You don't get any bright whites, you don't get any really dark darks. Everything will kind of fall into the middle area. So if you want to push it more extreme, you just take the color you've mixed for this, do a little white, you do a little gray, you go both directions, and you can just glaze thin together to get that nice smooth transition and to just push that transition up. But right there, I've got a pretty decent blue cloak. Looks pretty nice. And you can see that I've got all these smooth, natural transitions. And what did that take me? I don't know. I was talking, so it took a few minutes. But realistically, painting-wise, it took, what, 30 seconds? Right? So just doing that right there, think about what you're undercoating. That's the take-home for this one. Because by just priming black and then going over it with a thick blue and then working your way up, and then you've got to block colors and all of that, you're going to take yourself a lot of time. This isn't always doable with every color. There are certain colors with which this works a lot better. Purples, blues, reds will honestly do this really well. Anything that's translucent, like those types of colors will do this really well. And you need to think about how you're undercoating it, whether or not you get into the brown tone or whether you can just do black and white, that kind of thing. But we'll talk about undercoating more as we go on. But I wanted to lay this one down first as a foundational thing. Because you can see here, in just a few quick seconds, I've got a really nice, beautiful cloak that's going to look perfectly good as a tabletop standard, but I have some extreme color variation. And all that was done through just some quick zenithal highlighting of black over the whole miniature, gray at this angle right here, and then white coming straight down. And that's it. And then 2 quick thin layers over top of it, and call it a day. So that's this video. I hope you enjoyed. I hope that helps to get some brighter color variations quicker. I hope you think about what you're undercoating, and we're going to play around with this one more in future videos. But for now, that brings us to this one, the end of this one. Thank you all for watching, as always. Appreciate it. Like if you like it, subscribe, and if there's any particular thing you want me to expound upon in these future hobby cheating videos, feel free to leave that in the comments. I'd always love to see it. There'll be more coming. Have a great day, and see you next time.